Hi, everyone. Welcome to the PreSales Collective Wise International Women's Day celebration. Very excited to introduce our wonderful panel today. We'll do that in just a moment. My name is Wendy McHenry, and I'll be your moderator today. We wanted to come together as a community to celebrate International Women's Day, which every year is celebrated on March 8th, which this year falls on Saturday. The theme for International Women's Day this year is accelerate action. And it's the actions we can take to advance women in their careers, to bring women's equality worldwide, to eliminate biases against women. We'll touch on all of these things briefly today. And in today's discussion, you should take away concrete actions that you can take to support your own growth and career development, as well as supporting other women's growth and development as well. International Women's Day, our goal is to amplify voices, challenge those biases, and push for progress. So it is a moment where we want to, as women, celebrate each other, but it's always about the action behind it, which I've appreciated. If you've been following International Women's Day for some time, every year they have a different theme. And at WISE, we are always thinking about how can we amplify each other's voices, which today I'm very excited to amplify Sarah, Giselle, and Gretchen, who are joining us for the panel discussion. Some interesting statistics that I found when we were getting ready for the session that I thought was fascinating. At the current rate of progress, which there has been progress made the last several years, it will take until the year 2158, which is roughly 5 generations from now, to reach full gender parity. I thought that was an amazing statistic and wanted to share that one. Also, this year's theme highlights that urgency for gender parity. We want to do what we can to increase that momentum to address those systemic barriers that are faced by women, not only professionally, but also in personal settings. So real quick, just want to do a quick exercise before we get started. And you can put your answer in the chat if you would like. And just to guess, what's the statistic here? When a woman's name was replaced with a man's name on a resume, how much more likely were the evaluators of those resumes to say that they would hire the applicant? And I can ask our panel, do y'all have any guesses?
70%.
75%.
I'll go with 65.
Over 60% more likely. Yep. Yep. It's amazing, right? Just that. And I know that I've heard some companies are doing things like they remove the name from the application entirely. Certainly, it highlights there are things we can do in our hiring process to reduce that bias towards women in the hiring process as a whole. And this is just one way. I know of many recruiting teams that do things like this, that they hide that name or blind that name during the initial resume review. And over time, if you've participated in any WISE events, we talk about other ways that hiring managers can help reduce that bias. Anyway, just interesting statistic I wanted to share. This is from Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In 50 Ways to Fight Bias workshop. She's got some great resources in there, and that's something that I'm happy to share in the Slack channel later if any of you would like to leverage that in your own teams. So with that, I'd like to introduce our fantastic panel, Sarah, Gretchen, and Giselle. I'd like each of you to go around and give just a brief introduction to our audience today, and we can start with Sarah.
Great, thanks a lot, Wendy. Hi, everyone. It is great to be here with a fantastic group of women. Big fan of supporting women in business, especially within the pre-sales organizations. I am currently leading the leading the global team at Sitecore. This comprises teams of field pre-sales as well as industry value advisors. I've been here for 4.5, almost 5 months now. Prior to that, I had a very long career, a couple of decades worth at SAP, doing individual contributor work before moving into various different leadership management roles throughout SAP. including an international transformation assignment, as well as leading a fairly large line of business team for customer experience. And then in between, I did a stint at Zendesk, managing the global team of pre-sales there for a few years. That's me. I
Thank you
describe
so much,
myself as a
Sarah.
pre-sales lifer.
I love it. That's great, Sarah. All right, Giselle.
Sure, I'll go next. My name is Giselle. I'm a solution engineer at LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn for just over 3.5, I believe it's 3.5 years now. Actually started off more as a data analyst and was doing that kind of work previously. I am located in Chicago now, but I'm actually from the Toronto area. And I kind of found this role kind of accidentally through LinkedIn. We had an opening as a solution engineer, and I jumped on the opportunity. I watched some calls and got to speak to our amazing managers and understand what the role entailed, and thought it would be a fantastic fit. And it's worked out so far. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah, fairly new to pre-sales, so about 2 years, and I also did a great enablement program with the pre-sales collective as well. So that's me.
Oh, fantastic. Well, welcome. I love that. I love that story. Gretchen, what about you?
Absolutely. So I'm Gretchen Fitzgibbons. I currently am a senior manager for a large enterprise team here at Smartsheet. I've been there about 6.5 years, which is probably the longest I've been anywhere. And I've had an amazing time kind of learning both as an individual contributor and now as a manager. I actually worked with a number of folks at Sprinkler prior to that and have a very sort of typical SE background of very different kind of how I got here. I fell into it kind of by accident as well. And I am based just north of Chicago. And I grew up in Toronto. So Giselle and I found out that we have very similar pathways that way. So I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love it. And my name is Wendy McHenry. Many of you recognize me from Pre-Sales Collective Wise. I am the co-chair of the Wise Council. I currently lead the pre-sales team at C Data Software based in Chapel Hill. And I'm very passionate about advocating for women in pre-sales. And it has been so much fun to meet so many of you over the years. And Giselle, I really loved your story about how you came into pre-sales. So were you part of Pre-Sales Academy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did the pre-sales foundations program, the very first
Yep.
cohort. So that was how I found my way. So researched the role, found Pre-Sales Collective actually through one of my managers, Megan, who suggested to join Pre-Sales Collective, and yeah, did that enablement program, which really I think helped me kind of start off on the right foot when I got my
Yes.
first, SE role. But yeah, I loved it. It was a fantastic program. That's actually how I met Allison, who asked me to join the
Yeah.
panel. So that's
Yes.
how full circle that all happened. But yeah.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I think how fortunate, right? When I got started, we didn't have such programs to get started. I mean, I came in not really knowing anything about pre-sales other than I had been working in IT and we were purchasing enterprise software and the SE came and I was like, wait a minute, that's that person's job. They just get to talk about technology. I want to do that. And that was literally all I knew about pre-sales when I when I moved into pre-sales. So curious, Gretchen and Sarah, if y'all can share, how did you come to discover the career? How did you move into an SC role for the first time?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I have a really kind of unusual background. So I started out in publishing and crisis PR. So I didn't know that solution engineering existed when I graduated university. I thought there were like 5 professions or go back to school. And I've always liked kind of living in 2 different realms of technology and people. And I ended up kind of moving into a digital ad agency where we were buying software. And one of the software elements that we bought was Sprinkler. And that was actually how I first even heard about a solution engineering role. And similar to Giselle, I made a connection with Alison Makalik, who is attending today. And she and I were sitting next to each other at onboarding. And she leans over to me and she goes, "Do you know what solution engineers do?" And I go, "No." let's figure it out together. And the rest was really history. It started to really combine some things that I loved, right and left brain, being with people, but being, into the tech and making people who may not want to talk to people who they're selling to, really get that across. So it was an amazing way to take that storytelling and become a solution engineer, which I really, again, I couldn't imagine falling into a better career, but definitely was not aware it even existed a few years back.
I love that story, and it's making me feel really old because I've had over 2 decades of being in pre-sales. And when I first started, I was a demo specialist. So the term pre-sales, I don't think had even been tagged when I first started my career, and there was literally nothing, no infrastructure, no enablement. No, it was fumble your way through. And I am that old that I was doing demos with dial-up connections. So that is how long I've been doing pre-sales. That's how I fell into it. But I very quickly, in much the same way as Gretchen just described, I loved the combination of the showmanship, the being on stage, but I also love the techie geek part. And to this day, I still think that the best pre-sales people are those people who are a little bit secretly techie geek. So yeah, I want to find out how things work. But the other part of me is like, I'm gonna wow you. And yeah, I love that combination. I love the variety that comes with so many different customer requirements. I love the fact that tech is always changing. So that makes it always staying curious and always learning. I love that aspect of the role.
I love that so much. I've been saying recently, I think the best SEs are those that are curious and they love to learn new things. Certainly, it's never boring. That is the nice thing about the job. I think that's fabulous. Well, I do love that the Pre-Sales Collective part of our mission here is to help people know about the best job no one's ever heard of, right? I don't think my family still understands what I do. And Sarah, I'm 14 years in, I'm getting there. I had a whole different career before that. And I moved in from consulting into pre-sales, which I do love hearing people's pathways into like how did they make that move. Definitely it's the people and the technology that make it fun to me. And whenever I find someone that loves both of those things, like, oh, you should consider becoming an SE. I think that's fabulous. Well, we've all kind of touched on it a little bit through our stories, right? So it used to be, at least like in my parents' generation, it was a career ladder. It is no longer that case. So I'll open it up. What does the term career jungle gym mean to you? And Gretchen, I can start with you.
Sure. I hadn't thought of it as a jungle gym, but it does make a lot of sense because there's a lot of different ways that you go about it. It's not in any way linear. And I think when I started out just in my career in general, let alone in solution engineering, I thought it had to be linear. I thought I have to go a certain path. If I go laterally or if I join another company where I go down a peg, that's a bad move. And what I've found is that it couldn't be further from the truth. The jungle gym really is using different muscles and continuing to bring more people into the play that you're doing and making it more playful. It's something, because I have 2 little kids at home, it's very relevant. So it's always better with better ideas and more people. And what I love about this panel and what I love about the Pre-Sales Collective and this group here is part of that jungle gym is also who's there with you, who's helping you find the next rung or say, hey, it's okay if you take a step back. There's always going to be more opportunities for you. And a network that is giddy, excited, and really open to helping you continue to advance and talking you through those things. And I think that that's something that I really cherish and I think has made the jungle gym more fun versus something that could be scary or there's only one way up.
I love that perspective actually about the playfulness, right? I mean, I think at least for me, at least earlier in my career, like that idea of like a lateral move or even like moving, you know, a level differently, feels scary in that moment, right? And like maybe you can't even see exactly where you're going. But yeah, I think I love that perspective of keeping it playful. I think that's a great perspective to have. Um, I love that. Well, so from here, okay, let's talk about then like how do you best take advantage of your career jungle gym? How do you build that? How do you navigate it? So let's talk about that. Um, I'll open it up for discussion to everyone. Advice on building your brand. Either it could be your internal brand or your external brand. How do you do that and why does it matter?
You definitely need to have a brand that you are known for. I made a conscious decision 3 years ago to start posting about pre-sales on LinkedIn actively, and I'm now a voice, right, within LinkedIn, within the community. My goal when I first started doing it was to elevate women. I wanted to talk about women in tech, and you know, so that there's things I am known for within the LinkedIn environment. So I'm known for being a woman in technology in pre-sales. I'm known for talking a lot about pre-sales best practices and expanding, elevating the brand, basically. So that's like your external brand, which really helps when it comes to networking, when it comes to looking for a new job, and really helps to create a sense of community for yourself. Internally, you need to work on your brand because you need coaches and sponsors to navigate your jungle gym, right? You need people in the organization who know the type of work that you do, and how you do it, and can then be looking out for you, mentoring you and helping you with that next step. And I just wanted to expand on what Gretchen was talking about with the jungle gym. That one of the really cool things about being in a pre-sales role, a solution engineering role in tech, is that there are so many different places that you can actually go, right? I've worked with people who have moved into marketing roles, product marketing roles, who've moved into deep product engineering because they've got that more of that techie lean, who've moved up through the ranks of leadership within pre-sales, much like my career has all been like pre-sales, and moving into sales. I mean, when you look at all the different opportunities within a go-to-market function in tech, you really can, it is a spider's web. There's so many different places that you can go, but you need a brand and you need to be known for things.
I
Yeah,
love that so much. Giselle, go ahead.
yeah, I want to add on to what Sarah was saying about building your brand, and I think the internal part has been integral for me to even get into pre-sales, like get into this role in general. So I think it's important for people not only to understand, you know, what you can do in your work and how hard you work and the amazing ideas and things that you can bring forward, but also know you as a person, right? So I think like being vulnerable and letting people in and letting people get to know you, I think is helpful too. I found, you know, in previous roles, you know, being a little more closed off and not being so open, it closed off a lot of opportunities for me. So I found like, you know, coming to LinkedIn and just being like, I'm going to be myself. I'm an extroverted person, luckily. So it's a little bit easier for me to kind of navigate, you know, in person and of the virtual kind of world. But I found that has been really helpful for me just to, you know, crack jokes and say hi to people and be friendly in person. And I think that's really helped people get to know me as a human. And that has helped me, you know, or have the opportunity to even move into a solution engineering role of being like, oh, well, we know you as a person. And yes, maybe you've done this data analytics things in the past, but oh, I could see this, right? Like I could see this for you. And that's kind of how I got my opportunity, is that I think that I built champions through just my own internal kind of vulnerability in order to get where I wanted to go and where I needed to go.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that as well, Giselle, you mentioned something when we were just kind of chatting initially of Also the difference now, if you're fully remote, hybrid, or in the office, there's different ways to think about that. And I think that that was such an important lens to add to this, because yeah, if you're in person, you can have natural conversations sometimes, you know, in the break room, grabbing a coffee, you know, sitting in a meeting room together. But when you're remote, it's not that it's harder, but there's different ways to think about it. You called out something of like doing little coffee connects virtually with somebody in another country who, even if you were in the office, there was no chance you would have a way to get to know that person. And then when you see them at an SKO or something like that, and that really resonated a lot with me. And I know it's the same. I work 100% remote with my team being remote, and building your brand and the team's brand is really important. And what I love is that we're inherent storytellers and we're very curious. And the power of being curious and inquisitive really goes a long way. And I had a product lead who I really respected a lot, who he and I worked together. He was out of Edinburgh, Scotland. And we just started working on something together and hit it off. And he gave some really good advice. And he said, look, if you want to build your brand, sure, you can go after the really exciting projects that everyone's after, or you can find the unpolished pennies. Somebody needs that. You can distinguish yourself. You can jump in on something, bring others into that, and bring a perspective that no one else has. And you may actually get faster to building that brand and understanding and being understood in a way that you wouldn't if you were going after something that everybody is giddy about. And I thought that that was such sage advice, and it was such a nice thing coming from someone, again, outside of that pre-sales realm. But because you have a way to connect, that brand can really go a lot of places. And, you know, just like you said, it's so much about just honestly sometimes being friendly, reaching out to someone. And then what I learned the hard way, I think, when I was earlier in my career was I thought, oh, I'm going to work harder than anyone else. My merit should speak for itself. And then I would get really upset when a male colleague of mine was getting promoted, and I'm going, I don't get it. He's not even working on this. And that was when I really learned, look, if the people above you, around you, unless you really help them to understand you, they're not necessarily going to advocate for you. And that, while it was a hard lesson to learn, it was something really effective. And I'll say to my team, you know, I call it the boomerang messaging. So you have a message, you send it out into the internal team. And when it comes back from somebody you haven't talked to, that's when you know that message or your brand is starting to resonate. And those are things that you listen for and help to echo that I've found, especially as my company has gotten bigger, have definitely been incredibly helpful.
So Gretchen, you touched on, you know, the colleague you met with that was outside of pre-sales. I also have found that very valuable, not vulnerable, but valuable, to find people outside of pre-sales. And it took me a while to figure that out, right? That my mentors didn't have to be formal mentors, and like, where could I find them and where would that be helpful? And like, having, you know, a sales leader I'm learning from, for example, or someone from tech support, for example. So let's talk just briefly about mentorship and sponsorship champions. Sarah, can you share your perspective on how we can navigate our careers through those things, mentorship, sponsorship champions?
Yeah, I think that you'll have different types of mentors for different seasons in your life, right? I like to say there's a mentor for a reason, a mentor for a season, and then a mentor for life. I have a couple of mentors for life. I consider them part of my board of directors. They're people who I go to for advice about all sorts of things that I am struggling with, or not even struggling with, but just want a sounding board from. If there's something that you are struggling with in the moment, find somebody to help you to get through that. Maybe it's a project you've been given that you're struggling with. That mentor for the reason is only going to be there for a short period of time, right? And these people will come in and out of your life. And then mentors for seasons. So maybe you're at a particular crossroads in your career. Maybe you've been on the management development track for a little while, and you need somebody to help you get to that stage, right? There's your mentor for the season. It's the season of getting me into a leadership role. And then you have sponsors, right? So sponsors is somebody who is going to be speaking for you when you're not in the room. And there's the difference between, for me, between mentors and sponsorship, right? So those sponsors are people who know you very well. They are going to be speaking on your behalf. They're going to be talking you up in rooms that you are not in to help open those doors. And finding them and cultivating them is great. I'm mentoring 3 or 4 people. I'm mentoring 4 people right now, all at different stages, some of which are for a reason, and one is for a season right now that I am actually mentoring. So give and get in your career, and it comes back in spades.
I love that so much. Um, and we do have a question in the chat as well that I think is common, right? Is how do I figure out what that should be? What am I asking of someone? The comment here says it can be overwhelming to figure out exactly what I want to get out of it or feel like I'm not wasting their time. So, what advice in terms of like making that ask? And before you answer, I'll just say sometimes for me, I start with just like, a coffee meeting, more exploratory. Maybe if I'm learning more about their role, trying to build that relationship. Or if it's an executive like Sarah, who's really busy, I might want to think of 2 or 3 questions I specifically want to ask Sarah and get out of that time. And then I'll open it up. Anything else you all would add?
I think I would start off by thinking about like, what do I need? What am I looking for in general from any sort of sponsorship, mentorship first, and solidify, okay, these are the gaps that I'm trying to fill, and this is the amplification that I need, and then try and figure out, okay, who are the people that maybe fit into that box, if you will, who that's their strength, and then see if you have, have a coffee chat and see if you have some sort of connection there. Because I think the connection piece is key to having either, whether it be seasonal or long-term mentorship, but seeing if you get along, if you easily can flow in conversation, I think that makes the mentorship stronger and the sponsorship stronger. So I would say start there. Yeah, figuring that out.
That's a great point. I think too, if you're nervous getting, kind of digging into that, or let's say if you're in an organization where sometimes it can feel a little intimidating, like bigger companies can feel like that. If you have someone internally who has some of those connections, who has gone through a similar path or is exploring something like that, a warm lead like that, if you're trying to connect with an executive sponsor, can be huge. Sometimes it can just be a Slack or a Teams message. They'll just be like, "Hey, we were talking about you. I thought that Giselle has some really great ideas. Would love for you two to connect. I know there's something coming up." Just that kind of an introduction. It's amazing, what that says. And I think, Giselle, you sort of alluded to something too. Sometimes you're going to start working with a mentor and it may not click. It's not on you to force it to click. Sometimes you're just not going to connect with somebody, and that's okay. I think you can still be respectful and get a few things out of that, but it doesn't mean you have to dig in and that's the only thing you're chasing. I've done that before, where I was trying to force fit a connection that just wasn't there. And it wasn't anyone's fault. It was just like, oh, okay, we're not really aligned on that. Maybe there's someone else or another group of people that could be really helpful.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Great advice. Well, so as part of this, right? So maybe it's even before you found that mentor. How do you go about promoting your own accomplishments? So Giselle, you talked about a brag file. How do you create your brag file, and what is that?
Yeah, I actually found out about this through LinkedIn. So I was in a DIBS mentorship program, and his name is Chris and Arsenault, and he's fantastic. But he was kind of gave me the idea of like, yeah, you guys should all have a brag file. It's basically a document, or I have a PowerPoint basically that is I have impact highlights. So everything that I've helped close, maybe top 3 deals, things of that nature. And then I have any internal, external, projects or events that I've been a part of, links to it, right? Or I have some visuals, right? Of like, hey, these are my KPIs that I've hit in this quarter. Here's some feedback I've gotten, positive feedback that I've gotten from colleagues. So we use a program called Bravo. So I screenshot, my Bravos and throw them together into a slide so that they can see all the feedback I've gotten that's positive, within a certain quarter. Maybe it's my mid-year review, maybe it's my annual, but just every single review period that I have edited my brag file, if you will, to only display that current period. But then I have basically a running file of all the things that I've done, because like we said kind of earlier, like it's not on other people to advocate for us. Like we need to advocate for ourselves and make sure that like we're documenting, everything, all the amazing things that we're doing. We know we're doing amazing things. We just have to find a way to articulate it to different audiences. So I think that's one great way to do it.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Anything to add, Sarah or Gretchen, to that? About your promoting your own accomplishments?
I'll defer to Sarah first, but yeah, I have some thoughts on that too, because I love calling it a brag file. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Yes, I love what Giselle was saying for the brag file. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's trying to figure out how do you also make it easier for, like, Sarah, you have so many different conversations going on, from your side. What is easier, like when you receive something or you get feedback from an individual, what really stands out to you? I'd love to hear that.
I absolutely love getting feedback. And I love it when I can then feed it back to the person who's coming in. In fact, I just had that this week. It was great. Somebody had done a phenomenal job on a deal, and it's great to be able to highlight that back to say, hey, here's the things that the exec was saying about you, and just having them get the kudos for that. And then for my directs, I have a notebook where I keep all of a track of that. So when we're having one-on-ones or doing reviews, then we can talk about things that I have heard in the corridor.
I love that. I do the same. I use Smartsheet because, of course, I'm a total dork with our software. We drink our own champagne, I promise. I do that with my team, and we jokingly call it Mom's Scrapbook, because it's all of the, they're keeping their own brag files. But I also, it's so fun and energizing to just look at, especially, as they're improving and developing, and be able to come around on an anniversary, or if I'm trying to get them to President's Club, or I'm making a case for a promotion. It is just the cherry on top to be able to be like, here's the BAMs, here's all the ARR they impacted, here's what they're doing outside of that is making our culture and our community better. And to have that at the ready, I think is also just shows you're paying attention and they're valuable and you appreciate the time while they're also investing in themselves. And as long as you're doing it rolling, it makes it a lot easier than a 25th hour having to pull the last, few quarters of information, which is it's a really, really fun part of the job for sure.
And certainly Giselle alluded to this as well. For review time, I will say, like early in my pre-sales career, I had a manager, I had done my self-review. Like most companies, you do a self-review first. She actually sent it back to me. So she did me the biggest favor. And she was like, you need to write more about your accomplishments. And I see that today now in my team. The differences between the SEs who take the time to brag about themselves and list their accomplishments versus those that give like a 1 or 2 sentence answer. Please don't treat your review that way. Please make sure you're using that as a way. Take things from your brag file, put it in your review. Make sure you are talking about yourself. It's not bragging. You're just listing your accomplishments. Honestly, that team seems to be difficult for women in general, especially as they're starting. Take advantage of that when you have your review to document all of that. Plus, I remind my team too, to Sarah's point, we're celebrating. Make sure we're celebrating everything we did. Yeah, we're constantly as SEs looking at the next thing, right? It's the sales mentality of what have you done for me lately? We've got to stop and celebrate and like recognize, oh yeah. And then you see it all listed out and be like, wow, I did all of that last year. Yes, you did all of that last year. Celebrate it.
That goes to an interesting statistic that I heard about people going for promotions. So men will see the requirements for a role and think, oh yeah, I'm 80% there. This is mine to have. Women will see that and see, I'm 80% there. Oh God, I can't apply for that yet. Right? There's the difference. There's the difference between men and women is what's the point of going for a role if you meet all the requirements, because there's no growth for you there.
Right.
So yeah, and men will always be bragging about their accomplishments, and women, we're a little bit more timid and shy and reserved. You bang that drum, bang the
Right.
drum.
Right. And if it's the confidence that you feel like, oh, I don't have that confidence to reach for that. Adam Grant talked today about that actually you get your confidence from taking the action.
Yes.
Right. So take the action first, let the confidence follow later if necessary. Well, so let's talk about this. So let's assume you've been working with a mentor, you've gotten your brag file, you have an idea of what you want to do next. What's your advice and how do you communicate your career goals, whether it's career advancement or career jungle gym, right? How do you communicate that to your boss without coming off as too aggressive? So Gretchen, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think the first thing, and I was guilty of putting sort of the cart before the horse. And then I think that was part of why I didn't feel confident, especially earlier in my career. I think a big part of it is understanding, like, what are your personal goals? What are your stretch goals? Things I think Sarah pointed this out, like, you don't want to just go for what's safe. You can, but in order to really advance, it's that standing out, it's finding a way to push yourself and looking for different ways to kind of build people around you to help you triangulate that. So coming in and really understanding, what is it that are my goals? What's my purpose? And you don't have to know all that, but you're kind of aiming at getting those details. And then having some of the metrics behind that. I always love to say to my team, I go, again, you can have a perspective and you should be respected for that. But I go, it's really hard to argue with hard numbers. Tableau is my friend. I'm a big data junkie. So I'll do something like if I'm, let's say, having a discussion about wanting to either move my team forward or myself, I'll say, look, here's all the things that I've done. Here's the tangibles, all of the cultural elements. And then here's an example of what my team does and what I'm able to bring to the business as a whole, not just within our particular territory, but how we're moving towards the vision for the board, for the private equity firm, et cetera. So you're constantly kind of tying it to that larger vision, and you're helping them to project you sitting at that table you want to sit at. And then the other part of that is when you're not at that table yet, finding that sponsor. And as we talked about earlier, it doesn't necessarily have to be the VP of your particular group. It can be, sales partners, if you can really get in with them and they're, you're making them a lot of money. So there's a give get there of getting them to speak on your behalf, getting them to validate, because unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of these decisions and a lot of that development comes down to people having just a conversation. Yes, there are metrics, but often they'll say, well, have you worked with this person? What do you think about them? And having someone in the room to be like, oh, absolutely, you really need to think about bringing them in. It goes so much further, and having the data and the business cases behind it make it less about being aggressive and more about being assertive and confident that you're already acting in that position. This is a foregone conclusion.
Right. Well, we got a good question in the chat here. Any advice on how to break into SE management if you can't do it at your current company? Is a lateral move to another IC position your only option? Manager job requirements always require 2 to 4 years of management experience. But remember what Sarah said, you don't need to hit all the requirements in the job posting. Just keep reminding yourself of that. Everyone. But anyway, what is your advice? And I opened that up to the group. What is your advice about breaking into SE management? And then secondarily, if you can't do that where you are?
So I think one of the things that you can look at is can you demonstrate management or leadership of something, right? So have you taken on a project? Have you? I'll give you an example. So for your company kickoff, SEs are often asked to do some sort of enablement for AEs at a company kickoff, right? Is that something that you could volunteer for to manage that? So now you're managing like a project, you're managing different work streams, you're managing people within that, you're responsible for the expected outcomes and the metrics that are associated with it. So you can demonstrate management and leadership experience in isolated cases without necessarily having the title to go with it.
Good advice. And in some cases, I think it also depends on a couple of different criteria. Like I know when I came to Smartsheet, I was acting as like a leader from a peer-to-peer leader, but I was not, by title. And when I came to Smartsheet, I actually took a title downgrade. But the reason that I went with that move is that I had a couple of sponsors that I had worked with internally in sales that I said, hey, I want to be here. I like the technology, but what do you see as career development for me if I'm coming over? Is this, is there already a ceiling in place or do you see a lot of movement? And she was a great advocate for me. And she was like, there's a ton of movement. They're just getting large enterprise started. You'd be able to come in. And she was like, I will help you to get into a position of success. Let's talk about what that looks like. And we were almost mapping when I got there, even though my title was like a senior SE, to get to that path and have that as kind of like stepping stones to that direction. So, and the advice on working on those projects, especially with high visibility or ones that work cross-departmentally, that cross-departmental experience goes a long way. And you can show how you're not only managing or working with and leading the team yourself, but how you're working across those important parts of the organization.
Right. In my current company, there are opportunities to work across go-to-market. Those are great ways to showcase your skills. And then I have an unconventional way you can grow your leadership skills, is something that worked for me when I wasn't getting those opportunities that I wanted. I kind of hit that proverbial glass ceiling where I was. I actually joined a nonprofit board and eventually I worked my way up, I mean, over many years to vice president, then president. And I actually am about to retire from that board. But I have to tell you, in that experience, I just skyrocketed my leadership skills, honestly. And that is, and I've known many other leaders in tech that serve on nonprofit boards. It's just something to consider. I mean, it's a volunteer effort, but honestly, you learn a lot about running a business when you sit on the board, and then there's leadership roles available on the board. So if you can devote your time and energy there, I think that's actually a great way to advance yourself. That you have the power to do that yourself. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Well, while we're still talking, also just want to add now, if there are any other questions from the audience, please go ahead and post that in the chat or in the Q&A. We'd be happy to try to hit on a few of those. We'd love to hear from you, what thoughts have come up for you through our discussion today. And while you're thinking of those, let's see.
I did want to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to comment on something that Sarah said earlier about the men applying for jobs, that they think, okay, I'm like 80% there, so I'm going to apply. That really resonated for me because this is the first role and, job that I've had that I was not qualified for, that I went for fully. So I was terrified. I was like, this is probably not going to happen, but I'm going to, do what I can, speak to the managers, understand what this role is about. I'm going to practice. I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. And, I didn't get the role the first time I interviewed and applied, but because, they said like, you did really well and, we'd consider it, but like, you don't have any experience. Like if another role pops up, like an associate level, we'll get back to you kind of thing. And luckily for me, a couple months, like a month later or so, they got back to me and said, hey, we're actually opening up an associate level role. Are you still interested? And I said, absolutely. So it was just a matter of like, that was the first time for me. I was like, I want to take a jump. I want to take a risk, right? I'm going to take a jump. I did the enablement program with PreSales fundamentals, and it was like, that gave me the confidence to be like, I can do this. Let me just do what I need to do externally, get the advice that I need and get the training I need to put my best foot forward here. And then like, I know that like, there's a lot of room for improvement and growth, but like, hey, this is my starting point, right? Like, is this good enough? I hope so. But it was yeah, I just wanted to share that I took that chance and it's paid off for me. So
Love
I
that.
encourage
I
more to
love
do
that.
so.
I love that. Well, we do have a few questions from our audience today. So first question, if you're new to the field, what would you advise as incentive when seeking mentorship for their time? So how do you incentivize getting someone's time?
Uh, I always used to be afraid of reaching out to people I admired, especially if they had a big job title, right, to ask for advice. But I got to tell you, now that I have that title, I never say no to somebody who asks me for help,
Yeah.
right? So just have the courage to ask, right? If it's going to be a big lift, I'm definitely going to want a coffee. Buy me a coffee.
Yeah.
Or a book recommend.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, if somebody, if you're reaching out to somebody and you're worried, or they're sort of saying that they need an incentive, probably not a good person to mentor you, because
Right.
if you have someone who's it's in it for me, they're really not going to be very giving to
Right.
you, and you're going to end up giving a lot and they're just going to be taking, and it's actually going to take away a lot of that energy and excitement, because people in those positions, unfortunately, not very often, but sometimes you will have that. A lot of it's such a compliment if anyone reaches out to me in work or outside of work and says, I would love to pick your brain. That made my entire week, because I'm
Yeah.
going, oh, I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly special. I've said yes to things and tried and put myself in a position to look stupid so that other people realize that it's okay. You don't have to know everything. So it is such a compliment. And even taking 15 minutes to hear, you always learn something from the person you're talking to. It's a two-way street. There's
Yes.
so much,
Yeah.
like you can ask them like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. How cool.
Right.
And then there could be something that comes up. Like what I love looking for, and it honestly gives me such energy, is if I know somebody, let's say on our APJ org, who doesn't get to work on a lot of other things, and I hear a project come up and I know that they're interested, I love throwing it over the fence to them. That has connected the entire company in a way that you're really just like shuttling them between really cool ops that they may not hear about. That is the highlight. I don't know, Sarah, and I think for Giselle, even if you're getting a chance to mentor people, it's so energizing. It really is. It's the best
Yes.
part of the job when you're not sitting in meetings where you're going, oh my gosh. It is,
Yeah.
it is what makes this
Yes.
role
Yes.
so cool, is that everyone brings something different.
Right. Well, and then the next question actually goes right into that. What are the expectations around a mentor-mentee relationship?
I feel like you set those expectations together, perhaps,
Yes.
right? Of like, this is what I'm hoping to get, hey, and then the other person says, hey, this is what I can provide. Are we in alignment and move forward, rather than I'm expecting so much from this person and maybe that's not even their strength, or, that's not what they're able to give. So it's just, making sure there's some alignment, I think, on both sides is important.
Yeah. Or they can point you to somebody. I mean, a lot of it is also like, you may know somebody, be like, oh, there's this awesome woman out of London who I think you two would hit it off. You should reach out to her, give you a chance. I know she's working on something, different time zones, but maybe you all can find something. It's the playing almost like matchmaker in a weird way. That can be really exciting.
Yes. I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next question. And I love all the conversation around mentee-mentor relationship. I think that's fabulous. So helpful for everyone. I think that's the number one question I get asked at WISE is about mentorship. So love that we were able to have some time about that. But next question. I would love to hear how the panelists have juggled career and family life commitments, especially as SE roles can often include significant travel.
All right, I'll go first because I'm the oldest and I've probably been through, you guys have earlier in your career. So I had very young kids when I did my transformational assignment out in China. And now I worked for a European company, and I'm now in an APAC time zone, which meant that I had a day job in China. And then I would have a ton of like the global meetings that would take place like late at night, because then I'm back in the European and American time zones. But I would carve out on my calendar, it was religious. There were 2 hours. It was between 6 and 8 o'clock every night. And that was family dinner time, bath time, homework time, whatever. And I have kept that throughout. And I've got one kid off at university now, and one who's almost about to graduate. So, you know, I've kept that going. Is I have time on my calendar where my laptop's down, my phone is away, and I am present for the family. And it's a 2 hour slot every day. And that's how I've balanced it. And that came from advice from somebody else when I was a young mum. That older person told me, you can't have it all. It's a blend. It's not a balance. It's like it's going to ebb and flow, right? But you can't have it all the time. So you have to pick and choose your battles, right? And so that 2 hour, that was my time with the family, and the family knew it. Work knew it.
Yeah. That's and I think when I first, I have a daughter who's 8 and a son who's 5, and when I started, I was the only person on our team who was pregnant or had a kid, and I felt very sort of isolated because I was always like, can't do that. I can't travel on a whim. And I used to feel really bad about it. I was like, I'm setting my career back. And then one day I woke up and I was like, no, this is, you know, in 2 years from now, am I going to remember that I missed that on-site, or am I going to remember that I wasn't present? And I think a lot of it, I love what you said, Sarah, about like, I finally was just, I am maniacal about my time with my family.
Yeah.
And I at first was afraid that it was going to put me in a bad position, but it did the exact opposite. In fact, it was something I should have been asking for mental headspace. Like I have it loud and public on my calendar where I'm like, taking kids to school. And I'll like, if it's a parent teacher conference, I go parent teacher conference, and I build buffers around it. And I say the same for my team, because if I'm not setting the precedent that this is important to me, then they're not going to know if it's important and it's you know, really free for them to do the same thing. And I'll back them up if there's a sales rep who has something, who's doing, usually we know it's not going to be successful because it's turned around real quick. And finding a way to go back to them and go, yeah, I know that you sent them this on Friday evening and you expected them to do a demo on Monday morning at 8 a.m. When they have this time block. Do we think this is going to be successful? Because I don't think it's going to be successful. And using that as kind of a carrot and stick to know that they have their back. We have their back, because it's not going to be a successful meeting if you're winging it. And for travel too, I think a lot of that you can use, say, hey, look, and laying that, I'm a big proponent of laying that out and reiterating those things with your teams, because sellers are professional persuaders. That's their job. So our job is also to meet them where, you know, we need to be. And you'll say, look, you know, whenever we're starting a new relationship, I'll go, how do you like to work? Some things you need to understand about my schedule. You know, again, these are working hours, but these are the parameters I have. I am here to support. Let's talk about how we can set this up more in advance so that we can do less work for more money, and we can be really thoughtful about those on-sites that we have. And I have yet to see, unless they're really egregious, any sort of sellers that haven't been like, oh, of course. Or yeah, I have the same thing. I'm actually glad that you said something because I felt like I couldn't say it. So it's not a negative. It's very much a chance for you to establish and reiterate those boundaries that we all, I think, hesitate to do, but it's really important for everyone.
Yeah, I think those are all wonderful points. And I want to just stress what Gretchen just said. If you are in a leadership position, your team is watching you, you need to set what is important to, you know, so that they have that freedom to take that time that they need with their family. one more quick question I'm just going to respond to quickly live before we start wrapping up. I'm absolutely loving this. So glad. Thank you for the kind comment. Thank you so much for the webinar. I'm new to PreSales Collective, but I've been in SE for almost 5 years and am feeling stagnant in my current company. What resources are available to seasoned SEs through PreSales Collective? So just want to highlight, I'm going to share in just a second how to join the WISE Slack channel. So because we do have a Slack channel, that is a great way to reach out to us. What many of our panelists mentioned, if you ask us, many people will say yes. So we do have a whole WISE council that are here to be of support as well. We have a bunch of WISE programming coming, but also our Slack channel for PreSales Collective has a whole bunch of other resources. I will tell you, as an SE leader, when I am tackling a new project, the first place I go is the PreSales Collective Slack. That is a true story. We have a ton of resources available at PreSales Collective. If you want to reach out to me directly, I can try on Slack. I can try to direct you to other resources available. So with that though, let me see if I can get my slides back. Just real quickly, I will share how to access the PreSales Collective Slack channel. All right. So thank you so much to Sarah, Gretchen, and Giselle for joining us for this panel discussion. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I thank you all for being here today. So the Slack channel, if you go to presalescollective.com and join PreSales Collective, it will give you access to our overall PreSales Collective Slack, and then the Slack channel for WISE is listed at the top here. Our WISE events are scheduled this year for the first Thursdays of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. Mea culpa for holidays where we might have to adjust it. We also have the PreSales Collective Digital AI Summit coming up on March 26th. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or any of your council members if you need any guidance or assistance navigating PreSales Collective. I'd like to wish you all a happy International Women's Day. Let's take time to accelerate action for women's equality. And I look forward to the next discussion. Thank you so much. And thank you, Gretchen, Giselle, and Sarah.